Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, for his contribution of his time, his voice, and his music for our intro and outro. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found anywhere that good music can be found. Also, big thank you to artist Steve McGinnis, who is the genius behind all of the banners here at the Outer Realm. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. We're so grateful for his creativity. Anyway, guys, you'll notice that Bubbles isn't with me tonight. Daughter's having a little bit of a snag, a little bit of a setback with her transplant. As everybody knows, she had a kidney transplant. So we're sending the whole family a lot of love, good wishes, and prayers, and just getting everything back on track as it should be. So anyway, get to me tonight, little old me. But not just little old me. We have, of course, an amazing guest tonight, Mr. Colin Saunders, all the way from the UK. He's sticking it out with us, doing live. And he's going to be discussing his book, Triangular UFOs of the United Kingdom. So what's inside this amazing book? Well, over 130 encounters with triangular UFOs, which includes missing time, men in black, and a whole bunch of fun stuff. So it's going to be a great show. But in order to participate tonight, guys, we have, let's see, where are we at tonight? We are on UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials YouTube, Outer Realm YouTube, UFO Gods, I just said that one, sorry, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, and of course, we're on Facebook at Canada's Most Haunted, The Outer Realm, UFO Paranormal, and United Public Radio, and people, we are on Roku. Yes, that's right. So if you basically have Roku, get on over there, comfort of your boudoir, wherever the case may be, and watch us live there. So we are just waiting for our guest to come in, and got a lot of thoughts with that whole triangular UFOs. It's fascinating. People see them all over the world, and people have their own ideas as to, are they one of ours? Are they one of theirs? We don't know, but they sure are popping up everywhere. So it's definitely, I've read a good chunk of the book. It's so hard because week to week we have a lot of people, our guests have books and such, and left me kind of going, wow, these things do really get around. So it'll be interesting to say the least. Anyway, Tamara, hello. Michael Kennedy, hello. And Adriana, hello. Gosh, oh, here we go, guys. 1 second, bear with me. I'm just trying to get to everybody. Okay, thank you. Guest of honor, hello, Colin. Hello. I think he might be.
Hello, good morning.
Hi, you're live. How are you?
Hello there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you okay. No problem. How are you? I know it's very late for you. Can you hear me?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure that you're hearing me. We're hearing you. Everything looks good. So thank you for staying up and because I know it's quite late for you and people are already chiming into the chat rooms. So how it works is we've got 7 chat rooms coming in, and just reminding the listeners, the majority of our listenership is audio, as we have worldwide servers that go all over the world, and there are millions of people listening. So when I will put up comments just like this, and I'll read them out, because this way our audio listeners can keep up with what it is we're saying. So again, to the listeners, remember we have 7 chat rooms, so I'm not ignoring anybody. I'm just trying to get to people as it comes up. If we move on past a certain point, then if there's time after the show, we can go back and address it. So now that I've got all the rules done, Colin, welcome all the way from the UK. Really been looking forward to meeting you and talking about this amazing book of yours. And I guess the best place to start, I'll put up the book actually, just so people can see it. There we go, everybody. This is what we're talking about this evening. And this can be found, is this on Amazon yet, Colin?
There seems to be 2 people talking at the same time, so it's very confusing to hear. There's
Are you
2
getting
people, somebody
feedback?
talks, somebody else talks
Do you
in the
have
background.
headphones?
Yes.
You may have a delay, or you may be getting a feedback. You may
Hello?
need hello.
Yes, I think that.
Are you getting feedback? You may need to get some headphones or.
I do have some headphones. Yes, I could try and plug in.
Yeah. If you put them in, it'll cut the feedback.
Oh,
Hello, Stephen. Hello, everybody. There we go. That should help. So let me get
I think
the book.
Time delay there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking you're just getting a bit of feedback. So we'll put up the book here, and people can have a look. There'll be a few pictures that I will show throughout the segment. Now, I have pictures from the book as well. So with permission, as we move along, we might be able to bring them up also. There we go. We'll put those down for now. And I think
hello, can you hear me okay?
Oh, much better. Yes, absolutely. Wow, big difference. There we go. Can you hear me okay now? Are we having a delay?
I can hear you. Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's much better, much clearer, much clearer. So, okay, I think we're on track now, which is like perfect. So, let's get the show on the road. Where would you like to start? I usually start with humble beginnings. You know, it gives you an opportunity to talk a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we can move on to your experience, if that works for you.
I'm not sure. There still seems to be a bit of a time delay.
You're a long ways away. Yeah, it's very possible, but that's okay. I'll give you the majority of the time to talk. So let's get into a bit of humble beginnings. Maybe tell us about yourself and your background, and then we'll move on to your experience. I'll just let you take it so we don't fight with the delay. Did you want to log out and come back in? Why don't we log out and then just come back in and see if that helps? Okay, we're going to try that and see. In the meantime, while we're waiting, Stephen, I know the Rendlesham Forest Guards, and my mom saw a triangle craft with a light on each end in the UK, and a white orb landed near my dad and knocked him near out of Stonehenge. Oh my gosh, that sounds a little serious, but yeah, orbs are definitely known to be around crafts as well. The orb was shooting white lasers all over the ground really fast and telepathically interacted with him and listened to where he wanted it to go with his mind. Fascinating, very fascinating. Rendlesham was, yeah, that was really something, wasn't it? It was like their version of our Area 51. Actually, we've got Philip Kinsella coming on next week to talk a little bit about Rendlesham and reptilians. I know it's going to be like amazing. Hold on, coming back. And my dad's friend saw an alien that kept hitting their tent in the UK. It was a tall, skinny alien. And when his dad called the police to report it, 3 people from the Royal Air Force Base, Fairford Royal Air Force Base came. Yeah, that must have been fun. Jeepers. Thank you very much. Love the show, Michelle. Always professional, easygoing. Do our best. We do our best. Hello, Tara. How's it going? Could be because I'm here, William. Well, hopefully not. I'm just going to see here if we can get Colin back. Try to get him back here. Use the link to come back in. There we go. All right, let's try this again. Okay. How is this? Is this a little bit better?
Hello there. I think you sound.
Can you hear me now?
That sounds good now. Yes, that sounds excellent.
Oh, okay, perfect. I like that. All kinds of people chiming in already, but before we get to everybody, I've been putting them up, but I'll want you to comment on them as we go along. Where I thought we would do is just start off with, humble beginnings. Just tell us a bit about yourself and your background. Then we can move on to your experience. So I'll give you as much time as possible just to do all the talking so we don't get any sort of feedback.
Okay, right, let's take it away.
Awesome. I love it.
Basically, I've been a draftsman all of my life. I've been involved with drawing. Even today, I'm still a graphic designer working in the embroidery industry. But more importantly, along the way, I've worked in the aircraft industry, the Airbus.
I'm losing you. Yeah, you're cutting in and out.
Also, I'm working in Aberdeen for. Now, I was based. Are we still? Are you still losing me up?
Yeah, you're just kind of phasing in and out.
I'm not sure why that should be, to be honest.
Yeah, because you sound fantastic right now. So there we go. Keep going.
Okay, we'll persevere. So I spent a year working in Aberdeen for Chevron Petroleum. That was an interesting experience because that involved some offshore trips to the oil platforms. So it's a lot of helicopter experience there, if you like. So a lot of aircraft and aviation experience along the way. One of the things about working for Chevron, when I was offshore, you would do a particular job, and then when you got back, you had to draw the findings, everything that you'd seen offshore, but you had to make sure it was 100% right. You couldn't go back offshore the next day if you'd forgotten something. So it's great training in that respect to make a good note of what you've been seeing and make a note of it as soon as you get back to the drawing office before you forget about what you've seen. So that sort of training came invaluable for the night of the UFO encounter. So yes, I've done a lot of interesting work along the way, and from myself eventually. This is at the point that we had the encounter, which turned out to be a godsend because I'm working from home and I've got staff working for me. And after the encounter, I found it very difficult to concentrate, and I started making models, and I left my staff running the business from home, which was like I say, it was great at the time. So So we'll get to the encounter in 1999.
Yes, absolutely. At your
Okay.
leisure. The stage is yours.
Okay, so
No pressure.
the 31st of March 1999, we'd been out for a bar meal to a local pub called the White Lion at Paleton, which is a small village out in the countryside. There was 2 carloads. There was myself and my wife. My wife was driving, and I was with my wife and my mother-in-law and my daughter. We was all in one car. It was my mother-in-law's birthday that day. She was 72, which is one of the reasons we were going out to celebrate. But the second vehicle, the Range Rover, had got my brother-in-law inside. He was driving that one, and he had some French people with him because he's got a French partner, and her grandparents came over for the weekend too. I remember we got into the car. It cut out on the screen now. It's probably back in now, is it?
Yeah, you're phasing in there a bit.
I remember as we got into the car. I remember as we pulled off from the pub car park. I remember looking around and seeing my brother-in-law helping one of the old French people into the vehicle, the old lady. So they was a bit delayed, but we expected them to catch us up on the way back. It was only a short trip back to where we were living, which was Hinckley at the time. So we set off first, my wife driving. I hope you can hear this okay. And,
yes.
Good. So we drove through the countryside. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no street lights, nothing. And we came up to a major road called the Fosse Way. The Fosse Way runs up to the Watling Street. They're 2 old Roman roads, dead straight roads that apparently were built on ley lines years ago.
Wow.
So as we came up to the Fosse Way, somebody mentioned that we was about to enter that road, and my daughter said jokingly, "Oh, there's been talk of headless horsemen down here." And we all laughed and said, "Oh, we'll keep our eyes open for him," joking away. Then as soon as we turned onto the Fosse Way, there were some lights hovering by the side of the road. There was red lights and a bit of white light mingled in. It was just the most amazing lights I've ever seen in my life. And we all started talking about them, saying, what could they be? Like, there's too many lights for an aeroplane. It's too low for an aeroplane anyway, and too many lights for a helicopter. And we just sort of saying, what on earth could it be? It was exactly half a mile from where we turned the corner to where the lights were hovering. And they were just by the side of the road, like I say. So we drove towards the lights, talking about them, and we came upon the lights, and I would say they were about 100 feet away. Now, I base that, I'm pretty good with dimensions, and a friend of mine here in the UK has got a narrowboat that we sailed around the canals. It's 70 foot long, and I've steered that a few times. So when I say 100 feet, I mean 100 feet. You could have hit it with a cricket ball. It was that close.
Wow.
But it was just lights. There was no craft at all. So we stopped and we stared at these lights, and they were incredible. At the back of what turned out to be a craft, at the back there were 4 big red lights in a line, but they weren't horizontal to the earth. They were tilted at like 30 degrees. And then there was other red lights mixed in and white, and it was just incredible to look at. You couldn't really tell what was there because the craft was invisible. So as we're staring at these lights, the sky, it just starts to ripple around the lights, almost like shimmering. And I thought to myself, my God, there's an actual craft here. It's not, there's something around the lights. Up until that point, I just thought it was lights, just lights in the sky. But then the sky rippled and it decloaked, just like on Star Trek. It was just incredible. And as soon as it decloaked, it became a solid metallic structure, a triangular shape.
Wow.
But we were looking at the rear end. We were looking at the rear end of the triangle. So as it materialized, as soon as it materialized and became solid, the nose, it rose up in the air. But it moved like a submarine underwater. It was incredible to see. And the way that it moved up meant that we got a view of the top surface. I could just quickly show you with one of the models. We'll get to the models a bit later on. But basically, this is an exact copy of the craft that we saw that night.
Oh, there we go. Wow. Yeah.
So when we came to the craft, the lights were at 30 degrees at the rear, like so. And the nose was tilted down slightly. So we could see a red light at the front underneath,
Right.
white light in the middle and the lights at the back, but they were all mingled in. But soon as the craft became solid, it then rose in the air like this.
Oh, wow.
So we got a view of the top surface. So we were 100 feet away from the top of this craft. Now, if you can see on the see on the surface of this craft, it looks. We tried to get the liquid effect onto there.
Yeah.
The craft looked like it was alive. The dark grey colour was like a liquid running up and down the surface of the craft. But these silver beams on top, interlocking beams, they were solid.
Right.
So the liquid surface was not a distortion of electronics or heat distortion. There was an actual liquid underneath the surface of the craft, running up and down the craft. And like I say, the lines on top were solid. They were not shimmering. They were absolutely solid silver beams that were interlocking like an old-fashioned maze.
Wow. And
we were all saying, wow, it's just amazing. Completely filled the field of vision. I would say me and the mother-in-law, we wanted to get out and get on board. We were so excited. I'm not sure if my wife and daughter were quite so keen.
I was going to say, was everybody feeling the same way? Everybody, aside from the overwhelm?
I think me and my mother-in-law were overwhelmed and found it absolutely incredible. I think my wife and my daughter were a little bit more nervous, but they still found it absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
Now the problem was my wife is a very sensible person, so she's driving, and she decides at this point, because there's a gateway just where the craft is hovering, she decides to pull forward and reverse into the gateway off the main road, even though there's no traffic around. The road is totally clear. So she puts the hazards flashes on and pulls forward to reverse into the gateway. Now, the action of pulling forward meant that there was a large hedge that blocked the view and we couldn't see the craft. And I thought to myself, oh no, if it's going to go, it's going to go now. So she reversed into the gateway. We jumped out. Sure enough, it had gone. But there was no smell of any aviation fuel. There was no sound. There was no traffic. No other air. There was one craft going away from us. So we stood there in this gateway, and we looked across to this biggest flying object I've ever seen. With this craft with 4 red lights. So I'm saying to the girls, look, there it is. It's over there. It's changed size. It's absolutely massive now. I think it's important to say that prior to the encounter, I had no interest in UFOs at all. Groups, I hadn't got any books, been to any meetings, anything along those lines. So we didn't know what we were looking at. And I know in my early reports, I thought that the craft had changed in size from the small one to the large one. But once I started doing a bit of research, I realised that was probably not the case, and that the large one could well have been like one of these motherships, a huge craft that was going away from us. And so we got back in the car, all talking about it, all excited, drove home. Now, my brother-in-law had bought the house next door to my mother-in-law. When we took my mother-in-law back home, we were surprised to find that the Range Rover was already there next door, and all the French people were out, and they were inside the house. So they'd obviously got back before us and passed us at some point. We assume it was when we was in the gateway, but we don't know why they didn't see the craft. They were that close to us. Now, there is a bit more to the story, which I'll come back to later on, which is what you would call the high strangeness of the situation.
Okay.
But for the time being, and for the first probably 20 years after the event, I only ever really talked about the nuts and bolts.
Right.
But there is some paranormal involvement there, which, like I say, we'll talk on as we go along.
Yes, of course.
So we got back home, and the first thing we did was do some pictures whilst it's still fresh in your mind. So me and my daughter, we drew the same triangular shaped craft with the beams on the surface. My mother-in-law's not very good at drawing, so she just described it as having girders on the surface. She described them as girders, and I called them beams, but same thing. But my wife, who was driving, she only ever saw the lights. She didn't see the craft materialize because she was concentrating too much on the road and not looking at the lights when the craft actually decloaked. So 3 of us saw the craft. My wife, the 4th one, just saw the lights. Now, when we drew pictures, my wife drew a picture of 3 red lights in a perfect triangle, equilateral triangle. There's no way we could have seen that from our angle, from the aspect ratio of where we were standing looking at the craft. There's no way we could have just seen the bottom of the craft and 3 red lights. So I thought that was a bit odd. Now, a couple of months later, I asked her to draw again what she'd seen, and again she drew 3 red lights in a perfect triangle. That led me to believe that there's a possibility that the small triangle was a bit like an ambush, if you like. That was grabbing our attention as we came down the road.
Right.
Now, after the event, once we got out of the car and looked at this large craft going away, the trajectory of that craft could have brought it over the car at the same time as we were looking at the small one in the field. And what my wife actually saw was, perhaps, we don't really know, but perhaps she saw the underneath of the large triangle as it came over the car, which is why she drew 3 red lights in the perfect equilateral triangle.
Yes.
And the other 3 of us couldn't see that, not from where we were standing. There was just no way. So that's a bit of a weird stuff, but something else took place, which I say we'll get back to in a bit.
Yeah, of course.
So what I did then the next day, I couldn't concentrate. The next day was April the 1st. So it's April Fool's Day here in the UK. And I was still trying to tell people about what I'd seen the night before. I couldn't help it. Like, it just made my job a little bit more difficult. I don't know if ET's got a sense of humour or not, but so fortunately, I got the staff, quite a few. I got 3 people working for me at the time, 3 members of staff, and they kept the business running whilst I just got involved with UFOs. So I started researching on the internet, but then I started drawing the craft in the Coral Draw. Did some nice drawings of it. And
do you want me to show the pictures at all while you're talking? I got them from your book, but I don't want to do it without permission.
No, please show all the pictures. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, 1 second. I will just bring that up. You can continue talking, and I will just bring them up. I've got the drawings right here. So 1 second.
And once you bring them up, I'm going to have a quick drink on my coffee to keep me awake.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, there we are. Okay, so I can maneuver here from here, so I can let you talk about the drawings if you want. And there's like a whole bunch of pictures in here. So
there is, yes. So initially, I drew the craft because I'm a draftsman. It was obviously that was the first instinct to start drawing the craft.
right.
But then I made some paper models from the coal drawings that I produced, and I remember going to my very first UFO meeting, with a gentleman called Omar Fowler, who ran a UFO group in Derby, and he was specialised in triangles, so we became great friends over the years. So I made some paper triangles, took those to the presentation, handed them out, chatted with people. But what I decided to do then was to make a solid wooden model, the first model. So I got some pieces of dowling and some plywood, and I made a triangular shaped craft, and I put the images that I'd printed on Coral Draw onto the craft. You can see the craft there, picture 10, I think it is.
Picture 10, okay.
So this is, actually the very first craft that I made, the very first model, was stolen out of my vehicle, out of the van that I was using at the time. It was broken into one night, and the cassette player was stolen along with the model. And I remember I took the vehicle to a friend of mine, and he said that it had been professionally broken into, and he couldn't understand why somebody would go to that amount of trouble to steal a cassette player. But a couple of weeks later, when I was looking for the model, I realized that had been taken as well, because the last time I had the model was inside the van. So that led me to build a second model, which I've got here. And this time I decided to put some LEDs into it. So I'll switch this one on. This is the first beautiful one I built this one 20 years ago.
Wow.
Trying to show the beams on the surface. It was difficult to try and get a liquid looking surface on the coral drawings, and a central white core that runs down the craft, and the top and bottom fit onto the central core, and they're sort of rolled over like a hovercraft skin, like the edges of a pie, top and bottom. But where they join the central white core, there was no nuts and bolts, no rivets, no welding. There was
Mhm.
no way of seeing the way it had actually been manufactured.
Just
It was incredible.
seamless.
It
Yeah.
was absolutely seamless, yes. So
Yes.
armed with this first model, I managed to get onto TV here in the UK and talk to people about what we'd seen that night.
Mhm.
I wasn't happy. I was very happy with the model, but it could be improved. Like, for instance, these beams need to be raised off the surface in 3D.
Right.
Now,
Right. It's self-impressive. So.
along the way, I was sent some images from Belgium, where a young guy had seen in 1993 had seen the underneath of a triangle flying over his head, and what he saw was these patterns, and these lines are in relief. These are all coming off the surface of the craft. We never saw the bottom of the craft. We only saw the rear end and the top as it reared up,
Mhm.
as it floated up. And it's just to point out that if the craft, it was that low, if the craft had tilted from the middle, it would have struck the ground. So the
Right.
rear end stayed where it was, and the nose came up in the air
Right.
like
Right.
so, like a stallion rising up in front of you
Yes.
to show the top surface.
Yes.
So what happened then was a friend of mine, John Mills, a very good friend, had bought himself a 3D printer, and he said to me he wanted to print the model, which was great. Like, you know,
Yeah, that's
so
helpful.
he came up. He came up with this one. This was the first model that we produced. Now you can see it's just basically all black, and
Yes.
we've got some beams on the surface, raised
Yeah,
off the
we see
surface,
that. Yes.
and we have the
Yes.
central white core,
Right.
lights in the middle, lights in the corners.
Well done. Well
This was
done.
just a production model,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great. It was brilliant, but it wasn't the right colours, but it was pretty close. Like the beams on here are black when they should be silver,
Right.
and there's, which obviously hasn't got a liquid surface.
Yes.
Now, John explained to me that it actually cost him a little bit of money and a lot of time to make this model.
Mm-hmm.
So my suggestion was that I could sell some of these for him on eBay, and if we made enough, if I sold enough, would he make me a bigger model that was more realistic?
Right.
And John agreed. So I started selling these little models, and all the profit going to John. He got quite excited by it, and he made another model. Behind me, you can see there's a flying saucer with lights.
Yes.
He's also made a cigar-shaped craft as well. So we sold the three of those on eBay. And eventually, we'd sold enough, and John then made me the larger one. So this is the larger one, which we touched on earlier. So this is more like an A3 size craft.
Yes.
And on this one, obviously, we've got the silver beams on the surface. We've got the liquid surface
Mm-hmm.
that you can see there. That's a good view of it there.
Yes. Yes. It's impressive.
And then we've got the bottom that is based on the Belgium sighting, because we never saw the bottom. We only ever saw
Right.
the craft tilting down.
Right.
But like I say, it's true to say that when it was tilting down, we did catch a glimpse of the red light underneath on the front here,
right.
mingled in with the other lights as it materialized. And it was at an angle like this to the earth. It wasn't flat.
Right.
Now, over the years, I figured that the reason why it was tilted is because we were driving towards the craft. By tilting the craft towards us, it actually exposed more of the lights than if it had been flat to the earth.
Right, so they could get a look at you as well.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. I never thought that they were looking at us. I thought they were
light
doing it
towards you. Maybe they were trying to get a good look at you guys.
Yes.
Oh,
But it just shows that there was some sort of intent there. I'm sure they did it on purpose. And where there's intent, there is a purpose behind that.
Yes.
But it was like they just wanted us to see it. Like perhaps it was an ambush because they were lit up like a Christmas tree. There's nothing else you could do but look at these lights when possibly the larger craft went over the top.
Well, I mean, you come up upon it, and you just see so many, or you hear so many experiences with the saucers, and the light just opens up, over top of the car or the individuals. Maybe it's the same idea. This one just sort of tilted and lit you up, and like, okay, who are you guys? What do you want? Or they're just showing off, so, being exceptional like they were.
I think they were trying to grab our attention. Now, what I've got here, if I can keep this one going, because I've done a couple of presentations now, and I persuaded my friend John to make me a transparent triangle
Oh.
to show what the lights were like when we
Mm-hmm.
approached the craft. So if we tilted that up towards the camera, we could see the rear end,
Yes.
4 lights at the rear end, as well as the lights underneath.
Right.
I don't know if you get an impression from this
Yeah, absolutely.
transparent craft.
Yeah, it's great. Everybody in the chat room is very envious. Like, look at those models. I think maybe keep your friend very busy if he's interested.
Yeah, I think there are still 1 or 2 triangles on eBay if anybody wants to buy the smaller ones. Yeah, these are like the hand size ones.
Reese has a good question for you. Did you experience any EMP effects on your car's systems with this?
No, it's a good question because good question. I should have said that as when we jumped out of the car, the craft had gone, and like I say, there was no smell of any aviation fuel or any fuel whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But also during the encounter, there was no noise. The engine didn't stop. The engine carried on running on the Ford Fiesta that we were in.
Mm-hmm.
And if the craft was making any noise, we didn't hear it over the noise of the car engine. So that's a good question, but no, the car wasn't interfered with, and we didn't hear any noise from the craft itself.
Right.
But that's a good question. Yeah. Okay. And after the event, it's a bit like what they call the Oz effect. You know, it was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop.
Reese says there's some brief. Okay, we'll fast forward that because this was at the beginning. I just wanted to give you a couple of comments. Triangles are iconic images. She grew up in Cold War England, and the delta-shaped RAF Vulcan bombers, which the crews dubbed the Tin Triangle, were everywhere, every day. I have always been fascinated by triangular UFOs or UAPs, and Colin's book looks intriguing. So just thought you would want to see that as well. And then we have a Rendlesham comment way up here, also pertaining to a triangular craft. The Rendlesham Forest Guards, he does, and my mom saw a triangle craft with a light on each end in the UK, along with a white orb, which landed near my dad and literally knocked him near Stonehenge. So, and he said the orb was shooting white lasers on the ground really fast and telepathically interacted with his father, I'm guessing, and listened to where he wanted it to go with his mind. The story just keeps going all the way down. His dad's friend saw an alien that kept hitting the tent in the UK, tall, skinny, but when they called the police to report it, of course, the Royal Air Force came along. So that's just more triangular experiences that go way back.
Yes. I think the oldest one I've got in the book is 1956. Sorry.
Wow. So what is that? The Rendlesham date was when? When was Rendlesham exactly?
That was 1980.
Oh, okay. So way after. Okay.
Yeah, around the 26th, 28th of December, I believe the craft came down to Rendlesham.
So 1950s.
That's two separate nights.
Yeah, that's way back.
So one of the people they were talking about telepathy with his dad. Now we'll touch on this because this is a strange thing that occurred. So to get back to the models, what I decided to do once John had built the last model was to go back on the road. Basically, I'd been quiet for a few years. I hadn't really got involved too much with the UFO fraternity.
Right.
I was basically doing all my research from the internet and writing some local newspaper articles that people replied to, which was very interesting. And whilst I was at a conference last year and I did the presentation there, I met a couple of guys, Philip and Ronnie Kinsella.
Yes.
And I was chatting with Philip and he suggested that I write a book. And I said, well, I'd love to write a book about my own experience, but I don't think there's enough information to be able to write a book. And he says, well, just think of it as being an extension of the presentation that you've done today. And that's really what kickstarted me into producing the book.
Right.
So I came back, wrote about my own experience. Then I started to collect all the information I'd got over the years from different witnesses, and then started asking other people to write in with any encounters they've had, but purely triangles, because that's what I was interested in.
Yes.
Just purely triangles. I know there's all sorts of UFOs and UAPs out there, but triangles is my particular subject. So that basically was the first 20 years of my chats and presentations, and it's all about the nuts and bolts of what we saw that night. Now we'll get to the interesting bit, which I never talked about before because people would think you're crazy. But times have changed.
You're
and
amongst
things
good
have,
company here, so that would be great.
yeah, I realise that, yes.
Yes.
So let's go back to the night of the encounter.
Okay.
So the craft is here.
Mm-hmm.
No, we'll put it around this way. So we're looking at the back of the craft that's tilted up. So I decided to have a look at this light here at the end, and I was staring at this light here. It's got like a crisscross effect in, which looked more like it was coming from the light source, like Newton's law of ring interference, rather than being a piece of glass with etching on it. It looked more like it was coming from the waveform that was coming out of the red porthole or whatever it would be at the rear. So as the craft then materialized and floated in the air like so, like a submarine underwater. Okay, this is the weird bit. It was like somebody got a pair of binoculars and put them up in front of my eyes like that. Because all of a sudden I could see these beams close up like this, interlocking. That was the first view. Then I had another view, which was this nose. And the nose was so close like that I couldn't see any of the beams on the surface. And then there was a third view, which is this one, showing the central white core and the top and bottom rolling over to the central core like a hovercraft skin. Which is where I say there was no nuts and bolts, no rivets, no welding. Now, without that close-up view, I wouldn't have been able to see the center of the craft from where we were positioned, because we only saw the rear end and the top two surfaces as the craft rose in the air. That particular view of especially that view there, was a close-up view.
So your vision just improved, like
yes,
big time. Oh, amazing!
And without those extra views,
yes,
I would not have been able to have created such an accurate model that we've got here today.
Right.
So the next day, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, how did that occur? It was like I decided it was an out-of-body experience, and I got close to the craft.
Oh, yes.
But part of me couldn't understand why, after seeing the nose and then the side view, why I didn't see it roll. Why it was like image after image, three quick images in my mind. So
could it have pulled you up completely? You know, people experience their whole bodies going up.
Anything's possible, really. We've got no definitive answers. I can only talk about what happened that night, and I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just
no, of course
telling the story of what happened and how weird it all was. But it does it all interlocks eventually.
Right.
So I decided to have an out-of-body experience. Then for the next 20 years, I researched out-of-body. I read books. Could never do it again. Tried meditating. Not very good at meditating. Now, not long after the experience, a couple of years, so it'd be the early 2000s, there were some conferences that were produced here in the UK in Leeds by a gentleman called Graham Birdsall and Russell Callahan. The two of them put on some fantastic conferences in Leeds. So I used to go to these conferences. Now, on one occasion, Bud Hopkins was there, the late Bud Hopkins. So I managed to get a quick 30 seconds chatting with him. There was a few people wanted to talk to him.
Yes.
So I told him what had occurred. I told him this craft reared up in front of us, right in front of us, like, just 100 feet away. Could have hit it with a cricket ball. And then I told him about the out-of-body experience, the three close-up images. And Bob says to me, that wasn't an out-of-body experience. That was telepathy. They were images placed in your mind by the aliens.
That would make sense, yes. That would make a lot of sense.
That's a bit odd. Before we got a chance to expand on it, this lady with a crystal that she'd found in a forest butted in and started talking to Bob, and Bob, being a polite gentleman, he carried on talking to the lady, and that was the end of my conversation, my 30 seconds.
Wow.
So I made a note of it, but I didn't take it on board. I still kept thinking it was an out-of-body experience. Now, the first 12 months to 2 years, probably, after the event, I started having other strange things happen, paranormal things. I'd had nothing prior to the UFO, no that I can remember, no
Right.
ghosts, no nothing throughout the years. Now I was starting to have other experiences like lights in the sky, some splats on the head, some whip cracks in the car. I put them all in the book, all the things that were going on, and I'll just tell you about probably the most exciting or the most frightening experience. And that was, I love fishing, and I'm in a fishing competition here in England on the River Soar, a place called Rothley in Leicestershire. It's only a small competition. I think there's only probably about 10 of us, and I'm in this field on my own. And there's a steep embankment down to the river, so I've gone down and I'm actually standing in the river with my waders, really enjoying myself, having a great morning, when I hear some footsteps coming across the field towards me. Well, in the past, because it's quite remote down there, there have been some farm workers shooting. So I thought I'd go back up the bank onto the towpath and make myself known to these people, because I didn't want them shooting in my direction.
No.
Now, the strange thing was, when I got up the bank, there was no one there, but I could still hear the footsteps. And there was 4 footsteps coming across the field towards me. In my panic, because whenever anything occurs, I always tend to look for earthly explanations first. I don't jump to the paranormal. You know, I'm not that way inclined.
Yes.
So I decided that this noise was a big cat, because big cats have been released in the countryside here in the UK, and there have been film of pumas and things like this.
Yes. Yes.
So I took in my rod holder, I got an umbrella with a metal spike on the bottom. So I took that metal pole with the spike on it to protect myself, and I thought, what am I going to do? And I decided if it was a big cat, I was going to go back down the bank, the river bank, and get it to jump on me and impale it on its own weight as it come down. That was my game plan that quickly went through my mind. And I stood there with this pole, absolutely frightened to death, and the noise came right in front of me, and it walked from left to right, whatever it was, and it was totally invisible, and there was nothing moving, no grass or anything. And then it must have only been 4 feet, 6 feet in front of me. It was that close, and it was loud. And as it went away, I started whacking the metal pole behind it to try and flush it out, but there was nothing there. The grass was very low. And I stood there and I thought, wow, that was weird. That's one of these space-time contingency things. Whatever I'd heard was not there in our world. It was like ghostly footsteps, if you like. And that was the very point, that moment, once it had gone away and I realised it was paranormal, that I connected that and all the other things with the UFO experience.
Now, what was the time frame between the two? Sorry, Colin. That experience and your sighting. That was autumn 2000. So oh wow, quite
so over a year, about 18 months later.
Wow.
And that was the day that I decided at that very point that the UFO was interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial. And somehow the craft had left some residue with me that was allowing me to pick up on these other things. And I started to think, well, all these other things that I'm seeing and hearing, they must be here all the time. But it's whether you're aware of them or not, you know. Really,
so you're tuned in now, basically.
Yes.
Yes.
But it wasn't happening to the other members of the family that were in the car that night. And like I say, I've had 24 years to think about all of this.
Yes.
So what I think now, I'll just touch on another thing. I'd not taken on board the telepathy part 100%. I kept it on the back burner. I was still clinging to the out of body experience, because I did get a bit of comfort from that, because I started to think maybe you can live without your body, that your life force, your soul, whatever it is, can come out. And it was great. It gave me a bit of comfort for 20 years.
Right.
But then I got an email out of the blue from a guy in America, Connecticut. He's never been to MUFON or anybody like that, but he's been going around the internet looking for people who'd seen triangles, had triangle experiences. And he came across me talking to Richard Hall on his program, where I talked about the close viewing. And this email that came from the guy in America, it started off by saying, just like you, I had 3 images placed in my mind with a close encounter with a triangle. And he goes on to say that, you know, he'd seen this light, he'd chased it in his car, he'd stopped, this triangle appeared, It was quite close to him. And whilst he was looking at it and trying to remember all the detail for later on, he said all of a sudden it was like he was close up to the craft. He got 3, the same as me, 3 close-up views.
Wow.
One was of some pipe work on the outside of the craft. The other was of some light, not light bulbs, but some lights on the outside of the craft. And he thinks the third image was possibly inside the craft itself. Then other weird things happened. It didn't quite finish there for him. But once I received that email saying, just like you, I had 3 images placed in my mind, it was like a eureka moment. All of a sudden, I realised Bud Hopkins was right. It wasn't an out-of-body experience. It was images placed in my mind by either ET on the craft or the craft itself, because the craft looked like it was alive. It looked like it was organic, even though it was clearly manufactured. But when it rose up in the air, it looked like a living creature. So it then appears that I'd also been listening to a lot of David Jacobs' work, where he's been dealing with the abductees, and he talks about telepathy all the time. Now, in my naivety, I always thought that telepathy was words in your head and words in somebody else's head going backwards and forwards. But as David was saying, that a lot of people receive images and pictures, not always nice images, pictures of the world being destroyed.
Downloads, I think, like I get them.
That's right. So when I got the email from America, it was like, eureka. It all of a sudden made sense. It was images placed in my mind. It wasn't an out-of-body experience.
Right.
That also explains why the other 3 members of the car didn't go on to have any other experiences like myself, because they didn't have the download. They didn't have the images placed in their mind.
Do you think it's because you put more emphasis on it than they did? Like, why you specifically? Because a lot of experiencers will say, like, there were many of us. Why me? Did you wonder about that?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I came up with some answers. One of them is, I've been a draftsman all my life. Right. So I know about drawings and I know about geometry, and I was in a good position to make notes of what we saw that night and to carry it on and make drawings and to make the craft. I mean, if this thing was done for a reason, then it's to build the models, to write the book, and to be here today on your program and lots of other different podcasts that I'm doing at the moment, spreading the word.
Yes.
So where did we get to?
Well, telepathy and
so
projection and tuning you in, I guess.
It did seem to be, in the end, I decided that was what took place. Then I've also got in touch with another guy. He lives in New Zealand now. Well, he got in touch with me. He'd read my story as well, and he'd had the same sort of experience with a triangular shaped craft, where he'd seen some views of it, and then it was close-up views. So there are 2 other examples of telepathy in the book, besides my own. So I am now 100% convinced that that's what took place that night. I found it a bit strange and a bit sort of odd to take on board, because you're thinking, have I had telepathy with an alien? And if I go down my local pub and tell people that, they'll think I'm crazy. So the best thing I do is put it into the book. Wow. So basically, that's the story. We had an encounter, a very close encounter. I believe some telepathy took place. And the reason being, like you say, is because I spent all my life as a draftsman, but I'm not involved in the military. I'm not involved in the government. So I'm not under any secrecy to keep this quiet. Right. I can sit here and tell everybody about it here today. And from the reactions I've got along the way for the last 24 years, everybody goes with it. There's not many people who are sort of are knocking it, poo-pooing the idea.
Well, to have 130 accounts in your book. Yeah, to have 130 accounts in your book, that's a pretty substantial amount of stories and witnesses. Frozen.
Still thinking the surf.
Yeah, you're just frozen.
A lot of the sightings are local.
Right. Okay, we're back.
I think that's when my picture came back up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
There's
well, I did some local. There was a UFO report in the local newspaper, the Hinckley Times. So I wrote back to the Hinckley Times with my own experience, and they did a 2-page spread and showed the models, which is really good. And then on that, I put my email address and asked people to get in touch. And I've got about eight witnesses, something along those lines, just here in Hinckley, in the one town where I live. They've all had
right.
close encounters with triangles,
Right.
and one of them actually, they're all interesting, but one of them, a triangle came down into this girl's garden in Burbage, which is sort of joins on to Hinckley. I say it came down very low to the
Yeah.
garden late
Yeah.
one night. She was freaked out by it, but she said when the craft tilted up to show the underneath, there was a glass dome underneath, and inside the glass dome she could see two aliens, and she ran in the house screaming because she didn't want to get abducted.
Oh,
But that is that's just amazing,
yeah.
like 'cause that's in my own town, Burbage, Hinckley, they all joined together. So I've got all these sightings locally, and then once I started writing the book, I put my own experience in, but there wasn't enough to fill a book. There was only about 10,000 words, so I decided to start putting in other people's sightings. So I took all the sightings that people have been in touch over the last 20 odd years, but then also got in touch with people through social media to write in with their accounts. Now, along the way, what I was starting to do, because I'm intrigued with the paranormal side of all of this, I asked people if they'd had any paranormal experiences as well as UFO experience. And there was more people coming back saying yes than no.
Interesting.
So there's a whole chapter in the book dedicated to UFOs and the paranormal. And that is just such an amazing thing that it does seem to me that there is this connection between the paranormal and UFOs.
I can tell you there is, because I've spent 2 decades working in the paranormal and ufology, and many of the people I worked with who thought, well, they knew they were having paranormal experiences, but the entities that they believed they were dealing with, half of them were having experiences with different extraterrestrials. Half of them. And I've worked with thousands of people all over the world. So
Yeah.
I think that validates your theory on that a little bit, because I went the other way and I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's a UFO connection to everything I'm seeing with these people who are having paranormal experiences. So there's definitely a link.
Yeah, I found out that it appears that a lot of people have paranormal experiences before they see the UFO. Whereas in my case, it's the other way around. I had, as far as I can remember, no paranormal experiences prior to the UFO.
Right.
But after the UFO, everything started to kick off, if you like.
Yeah, I think you were just, they opened you up, like they opened a door for you. Yes.
Yeah, it's been quite a roller coaster, to be honest.
Who do you think they are? Some people will say, "Oh, that's our military." Other people say, "No, it's this race of beings." What do you think?
I don't know exactly which race of being was on board the Triangle that night.
Yeah.
It may even have been remotely controlled. Who knows?
Right.
But I do not believe for 1 minute that these are military vehicles. There's a lot of reasons why. For a start, you wouldn't go around at treetop height in a secret military craft just on unsuspecting people in the countryside in the UK.
Right.
And also, you get lots of reports of these things flying at rooftop height in towns and villages. Why would the military ever do anything along those lines? If something went wrong, you'd have to explain why the craft was there and
well, in this
retrieve
day and
everything.
age, they'll scream false flag, but back then, it'd be a little bit different. They're very secretive.
Also, having worked in the aircraft industry, for instance, when I was in Sweden, we were working on a 34-seater civilian aircraft. So you would manufacture from 0 to 75, the first 75 aircraft, and they'd all be the same. Very little change between them. Any major modifications would then come from, say, 75 to 150 in the next batch of aircraft. You don't keep changing every single aircraft that you make to be a different standard to the one before.
Right.
Otherwise, you lose control
Correct.
of what's going on.
Mhm.
Now, in my book, we've got 130 close encounters.
Right.
No two triangles are exactly the same in that book. They're either different sizes, different
Really?
coloured lights,
Wow.
different modes of operation.
Mm.
There's no way, and that's just scraping the surface. There's no way we're going to be building
No,
thousands of
it
secret
wouldn't make any
military
sense.
aircraft,
Right.
because you need like backup for them. You need maintenance teams. You need spare parts, etc.,
Mhm.
etc. So
Right.
if you look at the F-117, the Nighthawk, the stealth fighter, they're all exactly the same, and the
Correct.
same as the B-2 bomber. They're all exactly the same. They don't change every single
It wouldn't make any
craft that they built.
sense. Yeah. No, exactly.
And I believe they've only built hundreds of these stealth fighters. They haven't built thousands of them. We're looking at 130 that I've collected. There's got to be thousands around the UK. And if you look at it worldwide, there's thousands and thousands of different triangles out there. All
Right.
they can't possibly be
Which makes
manufactured
it
by military.
no, which makes it very fascinating. You know, so many similarities, but yet so many differences as well. You know, 1 second, I'm just going to get this out. Pertaining to your being, I guess, woken up, tapped in. Once one door opens, you start to see other things before or because the person's vibration has been raised. So you don't get to choose what you see. It's contacted by vibration. Well, I guess if you look at what Nikola Tesla had always said, it is about frequency and vibration. And that would make sense when you factor in a lot of the different things that experiencers or contactees go through. And here's something for you as well, Colin. My friend, UFO Man, I guess that's a handle, says he has a whistleblower coming out that was actually a pilot of a TR-3B and has a photo of him next to one. And inside the cockpit, he has credentials to back it up. We have amazing intel on mechanisms. Are these, because I'm completely green here, the TR-3B, is that a British? Would that be British?
No, it's an alleged American.
Oh, are they?
triangular
Okay,
shaped
I
craft.
wasn't sure. Okay,
No,
interesting.
we've never seen any definitive photos of the TR-3B. But one thing I remember on the night of our experience, like the next day, I expected it to be in the newspapers. I expected everybody to hear about it because I didn't think it was just us. You know,
Right.
I realised that night that lots of people must see these things. And once I started doing my research, that was the case. Yes, there's lots of people have seen triangles. Now, if us members of the public have seen these, then obviously the military know of their existence, and it would make sense that they're trying to back engineer some of these craft. So whilst they may well have a secret triangular shaped craft on the go, it may be the TR-3B, they may call it something else. It's not accounting for all of the sightings that we're having around the world, and it certainly doesn't account for telepathy and all these strange things that are going on in the paranormal world. I think if you have a close encounter with TR-3B, that'll be the end of it. It'll just be an encounter with a craft. You won't go on to have any other paranormal experiences because it's a man-made object. So I'm not discounting the fact that we're probably trying to build something along those lines.
Yeah, reverse engineer them. Absolutely. I mean, there's sightings of these triangular crafts all over the world. All over the world, and England
is,
just
yes.
seems to really have a good concentration of them.
So the UK.
Oh yeah, the UK. Sorry, they have a really high concentration of sightings.
We did have a lot of sightings in Belgium as well in the 90s.
Yeah.
Now, just recently, as the book's coming out, more and more people are getting to see it. I'm being contacted from people in Belgium and France, and all around Europe. Basically, these triangles are appearing everywhere.
Right.
So, what about my thoughts on the engineering?
Yeah,
I'll quickly go through this because this is something that I've dreamt up myself.
Okay.
But it does not necessarily mean that these things are man-made. There's no way I believe these are man-made, but some of the engineering we can possibly understand. So this is my theory, because a friend of mine sent me a video of a guy doing quantum levitation with a piece of metal. Basically, he was cooling the metal down to 0 degrees Kelvin. It becomes a superconductor,
Right.
and then that will float in the magnetic field. So I came up with this theory that the craft that we saw that night, the liquid surface could well be something like liquid nitrogen trapped underneath the transparent skin. These beams on the surface could quite then possibly protrude down below the surface into the liquid, which would mean all of these beams on the surface are superconductors. Same with the bottom. Once you have them semiconductors, you have what's called quantum levitation. So then the craft could just hover in the Earth's magnetic field without using any energy source whatsoever, just by being a super cooled craft. Now, if I've come to that conclusion, I'm sure that the military have been looking down these lines as well and trying to create their own craft. The other thing that points me towards that is when the craft materialized in front of us, as the craft actually decloaked, these bottom two corners here, they had vaporization. They had like fluffy white clouds, and the nose was pointed down, and I believe there was also vaporization on the front of the craft. And the little red light that we could see off to one side, which is the one underneath at the front, was covered in mist, and that would be the vaporization from the three corners of the triangle. And that would occur because it's so cold and because all the superconductors on the craft. That's only a guesswork. Now, I have in the book, I've got two people who have actually touched a triangle. So that sort of
that's different.
That takes away from the fact it being really cold. Maybe the small one is, but the craft that these guys touched, it didn't freeze their hands or do any damage to them.
Or burn. Because how many reports have you read about where people get a sort of a radiation burn by getting too close to them? This seems to defy all of that with these witnesses.
Yes, I mean, there were no medical problems to ourselves. My daughter's ears did bubble up on the top, but that was like a couple of weeks later. We never did find a reason why that occurred, and it just cleared up on its own. But we didn't. Maybe we're just at the right distance not to receive any radiation or whatever was coming from the craft. But yeah, I can definitely say that this was not from this world. It was just, and the whole thing, the whole occurrence was so strange. Like the next day, for instance, when I went back and measured the distance from where we saw the craft, from where we turned the corner to where we saw the craft, exactly half a mile. So I've measured it. But when I turned the corner, that half mile, I failed to see how we could have seen it because there was like trees and hedges and things in the way. It was almost like the scenery was different. Now, my wife, who only saw the lights and didn't see the craft materialize because she was concentrating on the road, a few days later or a week later, she picked a friend of ours up from the airport and she came back along the Foss Way to show Ruby where we'd seen these lights. And when she came home, she said to me, you know, it's strange. It's like the scenery was different the other night when we came up there because I don't see how we could have seen it. So it's a case possibly of dimensions mixing up, you know, when the craft was arriving, when the craft was materializing in front of us.
That would make sense. It's plausible.
But the whole evening, so there was nobody else involved. It was just our car. The craft was there waiting for us. It wasn't being in the right place at the right time. I do not believe that. I believe firmly that craft was there
meant
waiting
to see it.
We was, yeah, definitely, absolutely.
Yes.
And that's the weird thing about these craft, isn't it? You know, half the population are being hidden from it, and the other half get it right up in the face, up close and personal.
I've been seeing them my whole life. It's strange to me when people just they say they've never seen one. I'm thinking, just look up. Really, I think, but because I do think you're right on that. I think if you're meant to see it, you will. There have been reports of people, like crowds, you know, like a large group of people being in an area, and a craft comes in, and only part of the crowd or half the crowd is witnessing this craft, and yet everybody else is like, no, we don't see it.
You do hear that, yes. You do hear that time and time again that certain, a crowd of people, certain people will see it and other people won't. I have a report in the book where there's a guy in Hinckley. He'd seen a triangle and he stopped and he was pointing at it, and he says other people were just oblivious to it, like, and there it was, just hovering in the sky, and nobody else could see it.
Right, right,
So that does happen a lot.
right.
Like I say, there's a lot of information in this book
Okay.
that people who are interested in triangles will enjoy. And to run through some of it, just
Yeah,
because
please.
I've been through all of the sightings, obviously, and tried to make some notes of anything that I think was important. Now, the underneath of our craft had, I believe, 3 red lights in the corners and a white light in the middle. Now, sometimes that's reversed, where there's a red light in the middle and white lights in the corner.
Okay.
In fact, Mal Orton from Sharnford, who's in the book, he, which is not too far from here, he drove. He was driving to work at 3 a.m. in the morning, at 3 a.m. And then there was a triangle hovering over a field right next to the road, and he said this thing was the size of a football pitch. And he stopped his car and he got out and he walked to the lights in the middle.
I think you're frozen. Frozen.
So
Back.
he
It's
then
okay.
probably 5 miles as a crow fucking to. So you've disappeared now, Michelle. I don't know if we're still online, are we? Are you still hearing me okay?
I'm here. Yep. It's,
All right.
it's
Good.
yeah, you've been freaking out on us.
So
we're back.
To talk about the colours, like I was saying, that Mal's triangle,
Yeah.
the huge football pitch one, they were reverse colours to what we saw. But if you go through the book, you find that people report not just red and white lights, but we've got green, blue, yellow, orange, bronze, purple, and pink as well. Sometimes a white beam coming down from the centre of the craft as well. That's reported in quite a few cases. But also, like the colour of the craft, I would have said it was grey and black. That seems to be the majority of the sightings. But we've also got reports of orange, silver, gold, white, blue, dark brown, and even a green triangle. And then there's reports of noise. And it's always the same. It's like a dull hum, a low humming sound, like a transformer.
I heard it, yeah.
Or buzzing or droning. And somebody described it as well as making a sucking noise like a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
And they vary in size from small to football pitch size. And some of the descriptions, this is interesting. Like, people talk about fridge pipes running around the craft and girders. I believe, and there's a drawing in the book from Michael Schrack that shows a triangle with all manner of pipes running underneath the craft, like a back of a refrigerator. I believe that these pipes are carrying, again, something like liquid nitrogen and becoming superconductors. So the craft, again, is getting quantum levitation. I mean, on our triangle, I believe the liquid was under the surface and the beams inserted into that. But possibly most of the craft that people talk about seem to have these fridge-like pipes running around the outside of the craft. So I'm surmising, I don't know, that these are superconductors with liquid flowing through them. There's also talk of feelings of pressure when the craft is close by.
That's
even
interesting.
one of the guys who actually touched one of these craft said the pressure was making a dental implant vibrate in his mouth during the course of the encounter.
Wow.
People also talk about cloaking. That comes in a lot.
Yes.
Shimmering like tin foil. That's a good description.
Yes.
Or black tar. A bit of missing time. And there's a few people say it looks alive, the craft, which is what I alluded to earlier.
Right.
One of the big things I learned in the early days was the movement of the craft. The way this craft moved, it floated like a submarine underwater, or like a hydrogen-filled ship.
Right.
And then when I used to read reports on the internet, if people were talking about the way the craft moved, if they said it glided, then I knew they were telling the truth, because it's the description, the way they move is very odd. It's not like a normal craft moving, and I guess this is down to anti-gravity rather than a normal sort of propulsion system. But people talk about it being fluid or gliding, floating like it's underwater.
Right.
They've also been seen flying blunt end first rather than point end first. You get quite a few reports of that. So the craft, I don't think the craft is made to be aerodynamic. I think it's made for stability. I think the triangular shape is a good solid object.
Right.
And then it's using whatever propulsion system to move itself around. Maybe those 3 red lights underneath change the vibration of it to get it from one dimension to another. I don't really know, but there's certainly a lot of information to be gained from all of the different sightings in there. But we're still only just scratching the surface, really.
Well, here's a comment for you pertaining to the lights. I guess his contact says it uses a micronuclear generator, which has exhaust in red orb at center, and 3 lights on each end are the force field generators, and use 4 different angle copper spinning wheels to generate force fields. I guess this is their witness who has seen the craft.
Yeah. Like I say, I've got no reason to believe we're not trying to manufacture our own. I mean, I'm sure we're trying to build our own, but I still say that the majority of the triangles we see are not man-made. They're not the TR3B. I know a lot of people always jump to the TR3B all the time, but unless you stood one of these, I mean, the one we was with
they
that
look
night,
very different.
They do, yes. The one we saw that night was definitely not man-made. Because of all the strange experiences that took place on the night and since then as well. So I have no doubt we are manufacturing our own, and there's a lot of people out there who will try and convince me that what I've saw is not from this world, but I'm not having any of it. I don't know why people try to do that.
Right. Well, I think because we reverse engineer. I mean, governments have been trying to reverse engineer since Roswell. So, but I think you'd be able to figure out the carbon copy pretty easily compared to something that's so quiet and stealth. And as an experiencer, I can tell you, I've seen crafts that are completely silent, and I've seen crafts that have that low hum that you talk about. And it's almost like what a dog whistle sounds like to a dog, like it's very distinct, I think, to those who know, like those of us who are used to it. Like we recognize it right away. I don't know that people who aren't used to it would actually know what it was. It would just feel like a tower, like a buzzing or a humming from a hydro tower, some of the bigger ones. Yeah.
I think it's something I do realise that with this subject, it's something you do need to experience yourself. I mean, I can sit here and talk to people till I'm blue in the face. The models help because that makes it more tangible.
Right.
But you really need to have your own experience to take this on board completely.
Because you're right. You can talk about it because you're very thorough in how you describe everything. But, you're going to have people who are still going to be like, well, I don't know. Until you actually experience it, it really is difficult to relate.
It is, yes. And when you do experience it, it's absolutely life-changing.
Don't you wish you could just take the image and the experience out of your mind and just go here? Because,
I have thought that many times, actually. That's spot on. That is, building the model certainly helps to visualize it. I know the first model I built, the wooden one with the lights that I showed earlier, I used to carry it around in a briefcase. Now every time I took it out of the briefcase and switched it on, it would make me shake. I'd get excited just by looking at the model and taking me back to that night.
To that experience. I'm going to have to hold that thought. I have to do a sponsor and station ID. I would say the interviews are just so nice. It's like an education for me, but then I have to do the actual job part of the show, which is this. So for anybody tuning in, you are listening to The Outer Realm, and our guest tonight is Colin Saunders, and he is discussing his amazing book, Triangular UFOs of the United Kingdom. And there's over 130 different accounts in there. So definitely check it out. We'll show the image again shortly. We are broadcasting live on United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, and who, just FYI, they came from Britain. They're not, American company, but British family. This is where their origins are. Anyway, also big thank you to Justin Snicker, Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for his contribution of our intros and outros. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music. You can find him on all the popular platforms. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind all of the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. So again, people, you are tuning in to The Outer Realm with Mr. Colin Saunders. So, wow. I have to ask you, after one sighting, have you ever gone back to that location just to see if they would come back? I
Many
know you
times,
did. Yeah. I would
especially
too.
on the anniversary. I've been back there many times and stood there.
Yeah.
But nothing's ever happened. So I've not gone back there not recently anyway.
Right.
But certainly in the early days I used to. Yeah.
What about trying the new? You have this whole new CE5 movement where people just can go out and call out. Like, I mean, I know I've been able to just telepathically put it out there. I don't have to do anything special. I was just kind of like, well, it would be nice if, if I saw you tonight, and then literally within like a few days, I have an experience. Have you tried that? Like, is that something figured? Because you obviously have a connection. They've connected you somehow.
Yes, I have been out and thought, come on, show yourselves.
Yeah.
But they haven't. It doesn't seem to work for me. I don't seem to be able to do this CE5. There's only on one occasion, just one occasion, when I'd been to see a guy called John Hanson and been chatting with him and his partner, talking about all sorts of things to do with the triangles.
Right.
And then I came back home, and I went up into the bedroom, looking out across the neighbourhood, and I actually said, "Come on, boys, give us a sign." And all this multitude of lights came down. It looked like a meteorite had come down and just broken up into all these colours of the rainbow right in front of my eyes. I thought, wow, that's amazing. That was quite a coincidence that occurred at the point where I thought, when I said, give us a sign. But that is the one and only time when I've tried to ask for something and something's happened. So the rest of the time when I've been out trying to call them down, no, it doesn't seem to work. I think, when they want to show themselves, I think they will do. They'll probably just be waiting for me again one night. I don't know. Well, it would be interesting to see.
The element of surprise, catch you off guard.
Yes, but also people say, was it frightening? And no, it wasn't. It was totally the opposite. It was, even though I'm not religious, it was like meeting God. When the craft materialized and floated up in front of us, the feeling was fantastic. It was one of warmth and love and affection in a way. It was just incredible to see. But maybe that's just because I was just so in awe of what I was seeing, because I've worked in the aircraft industry, I've been to air shows, I know what craft are like, and in that split second, aliens exist. And three thoughts came into my mind actually as the craft materialized and floated up. The first one was, my God, aliens exist. The second one was, abductions must take place. And then the third one was, this explains mysteries from history, because I think these have been around all the time. I don't know why I thought that, but those three thoughts came straight into my mind on that particular night. Then followed by that was the three close images, and then the end of the experience. Well, the start of other experiences.
I thank you for sharing that, because there's so many bad experiences that are always being publicized, and yet there's so many that are the opposite. Some people really enjoy these experiences. They just talk about how calm it feels and how they feel really reflective and how it changes their lives. but really in a positive way. They just go through it. It's almost like, you take off the rose-colored glasses, and you actually start seeing things for what it is. It's like, wow, we really do share space with somebody else or something else, and it's not scary. It doesn't have to be scary. Why? Media, the influx of media.
Well, that's certainly what happened to me personally that night. My whole life just changed in an instant. Everything I knew, everything I'd learned had
Right.
suddenly changed. And the
Right.
realization that aliens exist and they're here was phenomenal. I mean, that on that particular night, it was just incredible. But since then, over the last 24 years, I realized how lucky I was that night.
Yeah.
All of us were that night. But also
Yes.
the fact that these things, they carried on for quite some time, a couple of years after the event.
Mhm.
And I realise they're there now all the time. And it makes a difference when I talk to people or when people talk to me about their experiences.
Yes.
If I expect people to believe my story, which is pretty incredible, then why shouldn't I believe other people's story? And they tell me some fantastic things.
Mhm.
And certainly the section in the book where there's the link between paranormal and UFOs, there's some
Yes.
interesting sightings and documentation about this subject there.
Mhm.
But if you talk to the uninitiated, they'll probably think you're crazy. But at the moment,
It's a good kind of crazy. It's
yeah,
you're enlightening people. You're educating people. I think it's a form of evolution in a way to be made privy or to somehow be chosen to be able to have these incredible experiences. Sometimes these experiences are very personal. They're just meant for individual people only. And other times people are chosen because they will go out there like yourself and talk about it and educate people about it, and you're spreading the word. It's much like, I feel like I've been in television for 20 years and I've had experiences, and I've over time have found ways to bring on a platform, like much like this show. Amelia and I come out and we present, we give a platform for people such as yourself to come out and share your experiences, spread the word on all kinds of different topics. And it is amazing to me how people are really accepting the like UFOs on average, and having other races out there. There's not as many people anymore going, no, that's ridiculous. I mean, some people will say it because they're fearful, but I think when disclosure happened, at least on this side of the world, all of a sudden it's like a light went off and went, oh, okay, that's really a thing. Then you have other people who are like, everybody's got one of these, are going, I knew it. And they're opening up to it. And with the amount of people who've spoken to you about their experiences, that tells me that they're okay with this.
yes. I mean, if there was a reason for this, and the
Mm,
reason for the encounter, it would be to create the models and to write the book and
yeah,
to, like you say, to be educating people at the moment
yeah.
around the world as to what these triangles are about.
Mhm.
Certainly, it's changed my perspective on life, and
Yes,
but it has changed over the years. People are a lot more open about it now. You're finding a lot more of the connection between the paranormal
yes.
and the UFOs, which maybe 20 years ago people weren't quite so keen to talk about. But
They
certainly, I
didn't
think
want to talk about either. Now you got people talking about both, which I think is really,
it
which
is,
is
yeah,
really good,
it's absolutely fantastic. So
right?
I'll read you one of the
Please.
encounters from the book just to give you
Thank
an
you.
idea. So
Thank
this
you.
is a guy called Charles B. December 2011. So he'd been out with his daughter. They'd seen a light in the sky and they decided to chase it in the car. So basically, so we both reasoned it was maybe a helicopter, but there was no strobes and no noise. Somewhere between Cleesby and Manfield, we lost sight of it as it got too low. We looked for the object but decided to give up and turn back home. As we drove back along the A67, I said, let's look down by the river at Low Connors Cliff. With hindsight, I think they told me it was there. After driving down the track to the river, It was probably about 300 feet above the ground. It was huge, at least 1,000 feet across. The lights at the apices were dim yellow-orange, and there was a dimmer orange light in the body towards the back. I got out of the car and stood staring at the triangle. There was total silence. I could no longer hear the traffic from the nearby motorway. The body was black and it blocked out the stars, and I could see stars around it, and also a nearby farmhouse on a hill south of the river. It also seemed to block out the breeze. I don't know whether I got closer to it or it to me, but I seemed right underneath it. I could see black channels etched into the underside of it, which now made me think of a docking mechanism. It seemed to be made of slate or graphite material, very dark grey and smooth matte texture. I could feel the presence in my whole body, and a dental implant was vibrating in my mouth. I could see the channels covered the underside of the craft. They are probably 6 feet across and of a similar depth. I raised my hand and touched part of the craft's body between the channels. I was terrified and even thought it could harm me, but I did it anyway. I brushed my fingers over it and then put my entire palm on it. It felt like a hard kitchen worktop with a matte finish, but was not cold. The next thing I remember is my daughter shouting at me to come back in the car. She hadn't wanted to get out. So that is a pretty amazing encounter. I believe all the encounters in the book are genuine. I'll say that for a start. So this guy has stood underneath a 1,000-foot wide triangle that has come down so low, it allows him to stretch up and touch the underneath of the craft without any damage. I mean, that is just one of the most amazing encounters that I've come across. I think that's incredible.
Right. Well, the fact that it's affected you so profoundly and others as well, just the fact that I just like to see that everybody's had good experiences with it.
Yes, yeah. There's very few people say they've had bad experiences, but we have to remember that our government must know what's going on. They must. They're keeping quiet about what's going on, and I think the aliens themselves are not coming down and making disclosure. Whatever they're up to, they're keeping very quiet as well. So it may not be good in the end, for the human race. I don't really know.
It's not just the British government, believe me. The side of the world it's the same on a need to know basis, and many don't really think you need to know anything. So, do you have any plans to write another book on your experiences? Are you getting more stories?
I am getting more stories, yeah, but it's took me 24 years to get to writing this book.
Right.
It didn't take so long to write it once I concentrated on it and locked myself in a room at weekends just writing the book, because I'd gathered all the information, a lot of the information along the way.
Right.
If I wanted to write another book, I'm not sure where I would start now. I mean, people are contacting me, yes, with new sightings all the time, to be honest. And I guess over the next few months, there'll be a lot of people contacting with their own sightings. I could collate all of those into another book.
Yes.
But at the moment now, I've got no great inclination to do another one. This one
took quite some time. Right. Yes.
And to be honest, doing these podcasts, I find them quite a little bit stressful as well. Like, I've got quite a few of these lined up. But this is the only one that I've done in the early hours of the morning.
Right. Well, live is always, I always say live is great because you get to interact with people, and our live listenership is colossal. When you hear from me after the fact, you'll wake up again tomorrow and go, how many people? So, it's going to be pretty wild. So,
well, I hope so. Yes.
Oh, I promise you. So,
well, I think there'll be a lot of people out there who will take a lot of comfort from this book. People who have had their own experiences, who want to know other people have had experiences. And already I'm having people saying that the book is comforting in a way, because it's counselling to people who have had experiences.
Right. I think it's a great place for people to start, and maybe hesitating on talking about any kind of their experience with any skycraft. It unnerves some people, and I love hearing stories such as yours, and Preston Dennett as a friend and been on the show a few times, who's notorious for writing positive stories about encounters. And to me, that's really important, because there's too many that go the other way. Now, where can your book be found and purchased, and where can you be found if somebody wants to communicate with you?
Okay, well, the book is available on Amazon. It's available as a hardback, paperback,
Right.
Kindle, and also as an audio book as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I think the audio book seems to be selling quite well. People can contact me through Facebook. I'm on there, Colin Saunders. They could probably message me. I'm getting a bit filled up with friends at the moment. I think I've got about 4,900 friends on there, and keep getting lots of
Yeah.
friends requests every day coming through.
Uh,
But if people want to message me, I guess you could email me as well if I give you my email address.
yeah, feel free. I can definitely.
Okay, it's PEC13. That's Papa Echo Charlie Kilo 13 at hotmail.co.uk.
Okay.
So if anybody wants to get in touch with their sighting or
that would be the
want to have
way
a
to
chat.
do it. Share your stories. Maybe we
Yes,
can all
definitely.
talk Colin into writing another book. Colin's like, be quiet.
You never know. You never know. Never say never.
Never say never. That's what I say. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your experience with us and your stories and your book. And Chris loves your English accent.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's been quite a thrill.
Thank
A bit
you.
nerve-wracking, but yeah, we've got there.
Right. Yeah, a little bit of tech stuff, but after all, you are on the other side of the pond, as they say, so
Yeah.
bound to have a little bit. But I'm glad that we were able to get through it. So thank you very much, and you're going to be hearing from me, and I'm going to be sending you links and things of that nature.
Okay, lovely. That's great. Yeah, thank you,
All right.
Michelle, and thank you for inviting me onto your program. It's been great.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now maybe I know it's like 4 a.m. over there, so I'm hoping you'll be able to get back to sleep.
Yes, I hope so. Although I'm a bit psyched up, it'll take me a little while to calm down.
Yeah, especially with the coffee.
That's right. Yeah, I might stand out in the garden and have a look for triangles for a little while.
There we go. Thank you so much, Colin.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Well, we have come to the end of another fantastic segment here on The Outer Realm. We were speaking with Mr. Colin Saunders, and excellent, just excellent tales and experiences. And I love to hear, how deeply moved people are from the things that they experience. And not everything has to be fear-based. And this is just another example. No matter what your opinions are on the whole UFO thing, some people are quite comfortable with it. Other people are not. Just know that there are things out there. So anyway, big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring tonight's show. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, Justin Snicker. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis. Again, if you enjoy the content, please, whichever platform you're on, support us by subscribing, liking, following, whatever the case may be. Share it, comment. We love it. I will go in and put, of course, here is contact to the show if you want to contact us. You have any ideas you'd like to see on the show, or like to appear on the show, or someone you'd like to see appear on the show, there it is. But we also have Easter weekend coming up. So, for those of you who may not be tuning in tomorrow night, I will wish you guys a happy Easter weekend now for those who celebrate. Now, tomorrow night, we welcome the return of Mark Ollie. He's been on the show many times. The Polychronicon of Merlin, Joseph, and Arthur. This is a book that has been, if I'm not mistaken, Mark has said 50 years in the making. And it basically talks about the Arthurian King Arthur legend. And I mean, anything that he spoke to me about it is just going to be slightly on the mind-blowing side. So you definitely want to tune in with that one. It's going to be a really great show. Anyway, guys, thank you, and have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.